because they were so special, because we only got one can of peaches for the whole family for a year. We got them for Christmas. And they were those very kind of hard, plasticky like segments of peaches that were dark orange. But they were very special because we only got them, once a year, and so Dad would carefully divide them up into small pieces, and we would share the tin of peaches for Christmas Day for dessert. And I guess it got easier for a while, and then we got more peaches, which was awfully special. I don't remember anything much else about them except that we thought that they were very special.
How did you get eggs during rationing?
Yes. Yeah, there was 1 egg per person per week.
So how did Lita work around that?
Well, Mum decided to raise chickens. And so she did. She went and she bought some nice big hens. And we had somebody built a place where the hens could live behind chicken wire. And at first we got the little chicks, and quite a lot of little chicks, and Mum hung some kind of pole in out back near the bicycle shed, and put straw on the ground.
It was a mop, wasn't it?
Yeah, a mop. Yes, the mop hung upside down from some kind of a pole. And the little chicks all huddled underneath the mop head. And they all sort of snuggled into it as if it were a big hen. It was really cute.
And then you had all the eggs you wanted.
Yeah, we ended up having lots and lots of eggs. But the trouble is that we didn't want to eat them.
Why not?
Because we'd seen them as little chicks. We loved the little chicks.
Well, you didn't want to eat the chickens.
That's right.
But the eggs were okay.
The eggs were okay, yes.
Were there any other foods during rationing that you kind of remember missing or finding special?
Goodness.
Oh, didn't Lita work around the sugar issue too?
How did she deal with the lack of sugar?
I don't remember. What do you remember?
You had honey?
Oh, yes. Yes, she had a beehive. And we did get honey. It worked.
So she was probably able to bake too, wasn't she?
Yep, she was. And she was a very good customer. She would buy much more than anybody else.
Even during rationing?
Yeah. She persuaded them. She was great friends with the butcher, and she would go to the butcher and get him to cut up, a whole large piece of beef, which included a number of bones. And she would say, and you will chine that, right? And the butcher said, of course, ma'am, and chined it, whatever that was. And she would make a great big piece of meat, maybe, 12 pounds of meat. That seemed an enormous amount back then. And she would make it into several roasts. And yeah, she did a lot of very good food compared with what most people had. People would look at what she was ordering absolutely shocked, with their hands to their mouths. And how many people are you feeding, Mrs. Chiswell? And if she said 5, they'd be really appalled because that looked like enough food for 20 to a lot of people. But
How did she get so good at cooking?
how did she get so good? Well, she was the one who did all the cooking for the family because her mother was an alcoholic who was not good for anything much, mostly drunk downstairs and not much good for anything when I knew her. But they had, what did they call them? Boarders. So there'd always be 3 or 4 other people living in the family because it was a big house. It had like 4 floors and a basement.
This was the house in Argentina?
Yeah, this was my grandpa's house. And it was a nice house. Yeah.
And so Lita did the cooking?
Not really.
What made her start cooking?
Elena did the cooking. Elena she was a maid who had been taken in when she was just a little girl, like maybe, I don't know, 6 or 7. And she didn't have a good place to live. They lived in a very ramshackle place that I can kind of remember a bit, which was mostly outside. It was like there were steps and tiled passages. That was probably the first floor of the house, and that's where they lived.
And what made Lita start cooking?
Really?
Yeah.
Do I know that?
No, we were asking
I'm asking
about Lita.
about
her
Lita.
cooking.
Like what made her get into cooking?
Well, I think just because she was hungry and she liked good food. And Elena, I don't know how she knew how to cook. I guess Mum's aunt, Mum's mother. Mum's mother was a very good cook, and she'd lived in South Africa for a while, and she'd also lived in other places. In the Far East for a bit, I think.
India?
In India, yes. She'd lived in India for a while. She was an excellent cook, and they didn't have much money. So of course she did the cooking, but there wasn't a shortage of food.
No. When you were growing up, Elena did the cooking when you were little. But once
Elena did a lot of the cooking, but not all of it.
But when you came to England, Lita did the cooking.
Yes. Well, when we first came to England, we lived in a hotel. So the hotel did the cooking.
Right.
And Mum would go every morning, I think after breakfast, and talk with the maids or the staff about what they were going to feed them that day, because they got to choose. And the food was all made and served and, prepared and served and everything. And they always sat at the same table. And there was a waitress who always served us and would talk to Mum about what she was going to serve. And Mum would tell her how to serve it, because Mum had pretty high standards. But the hotel had good standards too.
So what are some of your favorite foods from your childhood or now?
Oh gosh, they did very nice foods. It's really hard to remember what they were. we did like artichokes, globe artichokes, and asparagus a lot. That was very special, which was absolutely sloshing in butter, even though butter was so kind of short then. And sweet corn. Sweet corn was hard to get because English people didn't really eat sweet corn. But anything that would get butter on it was something that we would eat.
You like butter.
Yeah.
Didn't you have what did you call butter when you were little? Didn't you?
Manteca.
Didn't you call it like fat or something?
Fat. Yes, yes. I would look at the meal coming and I would say, oh, fat. And they would give me lots of fat, because I really liked it. I was a skinny little shrimp that didn't have an ounce of fat on my body. But I really did like fat. Yeah. We would have porridge, because English people all had porridge.
Did you have butter on your porridge?
But we loved fruit too. Fruit was so special. But of course in Argentina at that point, fruit and all those things were really special and expensive. So we didn't get as much as we would have liked.
But you had plenty of beef there.
Oh, lots of beef, yes. And really good beef, yeah. And we would eat a lot. The various servants there, I think, all thought that we were very lucky people that we got to eat so much meat. I mean, we did have things like kippers. Everybody loved kippers. But, yeah. And they made lovely pies, and they made lovely cakes.
What are some
cakes were really difficult because of eggs, the shortage of eggs.
What are some foods that Lita made that you remember really well?
Oh, Lita made everything. She got cookery books, and then she started going to cookery classes. There were these advanced cookery classes at Epsom College, which was a technical college. It's probably a university now or something. But, yeah, they did all sorts of wonderful things. And, you know, they would do like an 8-course meal. And they would learn all the 8 courses. And then they would do a big demonstration. And that was lovely. And there would be specialties that we would like, particularly like profiterole. We loved profiterole. And so Mum would make profiterole, and Dad would say, you know, I think that this is a little bit too dark. And so Mum would make it all over again from scratch, and it would be perfect. And so we would have profiterole several times in a row. And Mum made the most wonderful, I can't remember what you call it, with cream all over it and jam and, gosh, that was nice food.
Eton mess?
Trifle.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, they didn't make Eton mess back then. I don't know why.
Eton mess and trifle are quite similar, actually, aren't they?
Very similar, yeah. But Mum didn't make it. I don't know why. But she made wonderful trifle. She had a very wide range of wonderful foods that she did. And, I mean, we didn't often ask for particular things because we got them. Mm-hmm. It was normal. I mean, we would have a number of courses every day. I mean, for lunch we had a first course and a second course and dessert. And sometimes supper as well. Because supper was a nice extra meal that Dad would say, I'm feeling a little peckish, Anthea. And she would toddle off to the kitchen, and about 20 minutes later she would come back with a lovely meal, a lovely dessert, sometimes a lovely appetizer. And yeah, they weren't big meals. None of us got fat.
No wonder you like restaurant dining.
Yes. Well, restaurant dining as we know it mostly is not that special. But the way we did it was very, very special. We would go to some wonderful restaurants in Paris, for instance, that Dad took us to, that were just so extraordinarily sumptuous. And then Dad would say, let's go there again tonight, the next day. And then on the way back, we would come through that same bit of town, and so Dad'd say, I've booked dinner at that place again. And so that was very funny.
Then wouldn't Lita come home and make whatever it was that
Yes, she did.
she'd make whatever it was she had eaten there?
Yeah.
What are some foods that you really enjoy cooking, or do you have memories of like hosting dinners or something like that?
I do. I remember, and we used to have all these people over for dinner, quite a lot of people at a time, maybe 10 or 12 or up to 16 perhaps, because we had the Nix's big dining room table, which actually had several extra pieces, which we had improved in the end because the extra pieces were getting so shabby. So we had new extra pieces made for it that really did fit right.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was a lot of fun. And I didn't want anybody to help. I wanted to do it myself and do it right, so that the meal kind of went together. Because if you have other people like do this course and that course, and they might not go together at all. And I realized that most English people are not thrilled to bits to be doing the cooking. I never understood that, because if you do the cooking, you get to choose the quality and the quantity and make sure that everything goes together to make a lovely meal. And also to use expensive foods, because a lot of people, even in England, who have plenty of money, they kind of crimp and scrape a bit about the ingredients. And I thought it was nice to just be generous and make it as lovely as you could, so that it took a long time to eat the meal, and by the time you got to the end, you were full, but not kind of feeling ill with it, because it was the right amount of food, in order. And people didn't mind that at all.
People loved coming over for your dinner.
People did.
Do you remember any particular dinner parties that stick out that were successes?
Well, people always loved like roast beef or something that took a lot of work to make the ingredients, or that had a lovely sauce on it or something like that. Those went down a treat.
Everybody always loved your empanadas.
They did. Yes. Empanadas was something that Mum would always make for Argentine people. And we often had big parties where lots of Argentine people came. And so there were several courses that went to that. The empanadas were like the appetizer. And of course, it would fill you up quite a lot, but then sometimes you'd be waiting a couple of hours for the main course, because the main course was cooked outside, and they had these things built for making an asado. I can't really remember how, I can't describe what they were like.
It was like a lamb on a spit, right?
It was a spit, or maybe several spits.
It went over a fire,
Yeah, they might have 12 lambs.
and that was for a big party.
Yeah, with a big metal sort of rotisserie gear that went into the meat and held it just the right amount above the fire. And it took quite a lot of hours to cook an asado. They would start cooking at about 2 or 3 in the morning. And so it cooked very slowly, which made it most amazingly tender and tasty, and that smoky smell was just going for hours and hours and hours, and the neighbors must have just been beside themselves because it was such a good smell. And
With a chimichurri.
we would put chimichurri all over it, yes. There was some dissension about the exact makeup of chimichurri. And I have met Argentine people who had quite different ideas from ours, but I liked ours best. It had a lot of vinegar in it, which is all right when you cook something very slowly for a very long time. It's fine. It doesn't end up tasting vinegary. I think sometimes mine tasted a bit vinegary. Yeah.
Are there any particular parties, like when John Stott was around, or particular groupings of people that you remember having a nice meal with?
Yeah, we did do that sort of thing. When John Stott came to Austin, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, we invited him to come, and quite a lot of people from the church too. So there were maybe, I don't know, 15 people there, which seemed like quite a lot. May have been more than that.
No, that was about right.
Yeah, and yeah, and I made a very, very nice dinner. There was another time when somebody else cooked it, and that was very, very nice dinner too. That was a lovely party. And I remember the one that I did, and they were so sweet. John Stott was just such a very sweet-natured person, and I was sitting right next to him, and I heard him say to our host, I'm thinking about what I'm going to be giving for Christmas to you. And he said, I was thinking $120,000. And John Stott said, that would be very good. We could do some good things with that. And that's what he gave him.
Yes.
Which is, I mean, I was very shocked. I only overheard it, really, because I was sitting next to John Stott. And they did. That's what they did. They gave that much, which is, by most people's standards, even now, a lot of money. Yeah.
Yeah.
But we had a number of parties where John Stott was present. But I don't remember details about all of them.
What's one of your favorite things to cook?
To cook?
Yeah. Or eat?
Oh gosh. Well, Wiener Schnitzel is a great popular one. People usually enjoy that very much, which in Argentina is called something different. It's, can't remember. It's got a special name. Oh well, lovely food. Yeah. And we always had, salads and fruit and all kinds of, lots of things. Mum never did a meal that was one thing. She would cook like 5 meals. And they would all come out just at the right time, perfectly timed, and the sauce and the gravy and the, would all be perfect to go with it. And she never made bird's custard. She made the really fancy sauces that you can make that are often fluffy and have alcohol in them and absolutely gorgeous. Even if you're completely full, you can't help eating some of it.
So food's pretty important.
Food is very important to our family. Yeah. Well, my mum's dad, I think, maybe her granddad, was a chef and had a restaurant. But then he gambled it away. I think there were 2 restaurants. He gambled them away on the same night, which was dreadful, because that was how the family lived,
Yeah.
And so then they had to start something again. And then, of course, the family largely went to Argentina, and they lived up in the hills. Well, they lived in the city of Buenos Aires, but they lived in absolutely gorgeous places like Bariloche, which was a very German area. Lots of Nazis lived there. And after the war, a lot of them just escaped and lived there. But it was a place where you could get endless gorgeous food because, they had all these mountains. You think of, the hills are alive with the sound of music, It was like that. It was wonderful cattle and sheep, and the food was cheap as anything. People lived extremely well, and there was lovely fruit. There were hillsides covered with fruit trees. I remember walking among them and climbing up onto the vines and picking grapes. Endless fruit just available there, beautiful cherries. And it always seemed as if the fruit tasted much more there than it did in Argentina. And, Argentina was in pretty dire straits for food, really, at that time after the war.
England.
Argentina, too. Yeah.
Okay.
And England, yes.
Yes.
When you were climbing the vines, where were you?
I was in Bariloche.
Okay.
Yes. It was just grape farms. Yeah.
Okay. Any final words on the importance of food? Or dinners?
It's such an easy way to make people relaxed and happy. Is to feed them and you can show them you love them. Just pull out all the stops, make lovely, luscious meals with unexpectedly generous, and people would just eat and talk, and there'd be music going on somewhere, and it was just very lovely life, a very luxurious life, really, but not because people were rich, just because food was cheap and plentiful. Yeah.